Hello and welcome to another episode of Push Your Glasses Up. I'm Mikey. Today we're talking about The Legend of Vox Machina with returning guest Mike Newcomb. Hey, if you are into these podcast episodes, the trailer reactions that I've been posting, the game reviews I've been posting, please like and subscribe to the channel. And if you're just interested in the podcast in an audio-only format, you can go onto any podcast service that you enjoy and probably find us there. We're a lot of places. So hey, let's get into it. Mike, welcome back to the show.
Hey, it's great to be here, Mikey.
It is the most stereotypically nerdy thing for us to possibly do. The Super Bowl is literally happening right now.
Right now.
And we are here to talk about a cartoon that is based on an actual play of Dungeons and Dragons. So,
yeah. I think, I didn't know who was actually playing in the Super Bowl until today. So I think that shows to Goya that I'm in the right place to be talking to you about the second season of The Legend of Vox Machina.
Yeah, plenty of trailer stuff happening. So if on the YouTube channel, if you have not noticed, I have started putting up trailer reactions to all the stuff coming out today. So check those out. There's one for The Flash, Indiana Jones. I'm going to be doing more that may come out before or after this. So keep an eye out. But yeah, let's get right into season 2 of The Legend of Vox Machina. You are the one who is, I'm assuming, still the newbie for campaign 1. I'm guessing you haven't gone back and watched the whole thing at this point since last season.
Who has the time?
Some of us do.
100-something episodes. I mean, yeah, that's true. Some people do, but I don't know.
You just have to stop watching everything else, is what.
Yeah, you just have to make it your sole driving force of your life to make sure you can consume every past episode.
And let me tell you, when I was down in Virginia for a little bit, back when it was still campaign 1, I literally would get off of work and just watch that. So that's how I stayed abreast of that situation. But what did you think as the sort of outsider to this campaign story? What did you think of season 2 in general?
In general, well, since my kind of understanding of Vox Machina is based on the Mighty Nine, because and it's obviously not Vox Machina, right? It's Critical Role. That was the campaign that I got into, was the Mighty Nine. And that's coming out as another animated series as well, I think, right, by the way?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure as soon as I saw that announcement, I shot you a message that was like, dude, finally, you get yours. That's
the one that's very near and dear to my heart, because I had a lot of really fun core memories, I think, associated around listening to those episodes and watching those episodes. But with campaign 1, it was really interesting to watch this because I was thinking about this, and I haven't gone back and watched the first season of The Legend of Vox Machina, but one of the things that stood out to me in comparison was that the first season was very much about Percy and his, what happened to his family, and the central antagonists were because of Percy existing. And I thought that was a really interesting way to introduce the story and the universe, to kind of tie it to a singular protagonist in the first season for people like me who like fantasy stuff, like D&D stuff, but don't necessarily know anything about these characters ahead of time. So it did a good job of kind of at least getting you up to par with what these characters are.
And it had a singular focus, so that it allowed you to not have to get overwhelmed. Right.
Yes. Yeah. And I think to some degree, I in comparing it to the second season, which is not bad at all, I feel like everything is happening in every episode to almost every character. And so much so that by, I think I got to episode 7 or 8, and I felt like they finally took their foot off the gas for a moment and just let stuff breathe for a bit. Because before that, it just felt like every episode was so jam-packed and a really true to life representation of what a D&D session is like. As somebody that has done dungeon mastering before, and I feel like you've probably played D&D at some point.
It's been a long time, but
it's been a long time.
Back basically around the time that we had the band going. So it's been,
I gotcha. Okay. So it's been a long time.
20 years,
it's been
probably.
Almost 20 years. Yeah. And so when you look at those kind of campaigns, and when I would structure it, you always try to structure every session with like some kind of big event, that can get the players involved and have them not just RPing, but then also have a big kind of combat encounter. And I feel like every episode would always end and continue to do this. There's like the whole season always would end with some big kind of conflict, some like mini boss level monster that they would fight. And that's why I always think this is such a good representation of what D&D is like, because every session kind of mirrored a 30-minute or 20 some odd minute episode of this show. But as a result, though, like you don't really get this kind of like common through line of like one character's perspective through the whole series. And you get a lot of other kind of storylines. And it's a lot to keep track of, I think, episode to episode. But, it's not because I didn't enjoy that at all, but I would have I almost was hoping to some degree, I'm like, maybe this season they'll focus on, they'll focus on Vex and Vox, which they kind of did, to a degree. They had a lot of stuff.
Yeah,
happening.
they kind of split it up into like trios of episodes. They did this last year too, but like even more so this time around.
Yes.
But let me tell you something real quick. The reason why there could be a little bit of overload of like so much happening at the same time. Remember last year how I was talking about how it was kind of interesting to me how they were kind of compressing storylines down and just kind of finding the balance with that. I think they found a tremendous balance in doing that this year, because it's roughly 45 to 50 episodes that they compressed into this.
Yeah.
It's a
you can
lot.
tell.
Yeah. It's they like the Feywild stuff. Well, like just right into it.
That was really fun too. Yeah.
Yeah. Right into it. Full spoiler stuff from this point on, I guess we can go into.
Yeah.
The party's not split in the campaign.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Never.
So that's what allowed them to cover Grog's story and the Feywild stuff all at the same time.
Gotcha.
And speaking of the Feywilds, how did you like the introduction to a certain character from campaign 2?
I feel like, I don't know, that was pretty funny to me, because I got really excited, because I think overall, and this is something I was talking to my wife about, I was like, the people that they get to kind of fill in on these different roles, it's more than just the people that would appear on the podcast, like I know Will Friedle and oh goodness, I can't remember her name, but all of the voice is that it's this kind of like mythic status voice actor woman that a lot of the voice cast respects, as you said, Mary McGlynn, right?
Yeah, the one who's with Will Friedle in these episodes, right? Yeah, that's Mary McGlynn. Yeah, she's also the voice director on this series.
Gotcha. Okay.
So yeah,
and I mean, like, she has everybody seems to hold her in really like high regard.
She's a legend.
It was just and then you got like Lance Reddick, as one of the Chroma Conclave people that stood out to me.
But you got little Billy Boyd.
And Billy Boyd, I know. I was trying to remember his name. I was kept saying Marion Pippin.
Well, which is funny too, because last season you had the other one come in as one of the characters. I don't know if you've like done any wiki research or anything on the Traveler and knew about that twist coming. Not?
I had a vague inference of it, because I mean he's a big part of campaign 2.
And they in those game sessions they did say like it's this person, whatever. Whenever there's a reveal like that, so I was curious if you remembered that or not going into it, because it is like the whole time I was just like, ooh, this is gonna be fun.
Yeah. No, I think like that character introduction alone was really cool. And the fact that they got into the Feywild was also really fun, because that's a whole side of Dungeons and Dragons that I think a lot of people eventually, maybe if they have a DM who's is adventurous enough, will just dump his party into that like kind of alternate dimension area, and you can have some wackier adventures because weirder stuff happens there.
They definitely went with the acid trip stuff.
Yeah, they definitely did. Oh yeah, that whole sequence when like it's Trinket is the bear, right?
That's Cheech Marin.
Cheech Marin. Yes, that
the funniest casting possible.
I was like, because the bear is talking to her, and I'm like, I swear to God, but I think that's Cheech Marin. Like he has a pretty, for people that are of our generation or older, like who Cheech Marin is somehow, especially if you got older siblings, what we both do.
Yeah, so, there's the obvious of Cheech and Chong. But I always
Yeah.
like to make the joke of, from Nash Bridges.
From Nash Bridges.
The
Oh my
Don
God.
Johnson show,
Yeah.
They were partners.
How could I forget? And so it was pretty fun to kind of see that come up in the Feywild episodes. That honestly ended up being my favorite episode of the season, just because it was like the first episode where I felt like things got to breathe a little bit and the stakes felt demonstrably lower than they felt all season for the most part. Like, especially
the first trio of episodes is dire. Like that is
everything sucks all the time and it's super intense.
Like I guess I'm gonna force you into transition into talk about those episodes though, because did you know about that plot point of one of the twins dying?
No, I had no idea.
That is one of, like, in campaign 2, like the most heartbreaking episodes. Like that's the episode. That's the one.
Did she come back? Did they resurrect her in the campaign as well?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, and it happened pretty much just like that, except it's.
Oh, okay.
I think the game session version is a little more emotional because you're just sitting in a quiet room with humans talking. And there's not like, you have to imagine everything going on. So all you have is Liam O'Brien's face breaking your heart as he's saying these things. And it's still unbelievable to me that they were able to convey that storyline as like beautifully as they did. Cause it is like, that's the Emmy episode. Like that's the one that they're submitting for sure. And they're also going to submit, I would assume, the song that is done by
sings to the
when he sings to the Sphinx. Yeah,
the Sphinx. Yeah.
Has to, you have to absolutely submit that song. But so that beginning of the search for the vestiges is where that game became a radio drama more than just an adventure. Like the stuff with like season 1 from this show is all very dramatic, and like the stuff that Percy goes through is super heavy. But I think that for some reason, as much as that had its weight, this was the turning point on the show, because like there was no like, oh shit, what do we do as somebody was dying before this. And this was the moment when it was like, okay, we have to, it's not just on the dice. There is also a thing that has to happen that instigates the saving here. And it's it's an unbelievable storyline. I love this story so much.
I couldn't help but, like, you know, knowing the mechanics of Dungeons and Dragons, like I was picturing, you know, a lot of these events that are occurring are like because somebody rolled terribly or something. Like I couldn't help but picture that. Like, I don't know if that was the case.
It was
in the campaign, but
like they translated it pretty much 1-for-1 in that scene. There's a lot of deviations this season, but that is almost so, like, 1-for-1. It was
Laura Bailey's character did a bad roll and like got wiped out or something.
It was Taliesin reaching for reaching into the tomb and causing everything to go off. Vax was down in this little hole and checking out traps or whatever down there, and that was happening upstairs while that was happening. And it's
okay.
It is as close to a direct adaptation of something in the game as anything has happened so far. And it's wild because, like, you know, there's like The Last of Us, which is doing like direct 1-for-1s in a lot of what it's doing. Yeah. But like in Vox Machina, it's pretty well adapted to be kind of its own thing while you still see the shades. But that scene is as close as I would say any other scene gets.
That was, I mean, you know, it was a very kind of emotional episode. I think what was interesting too is that the following episode, because I think that episode ends on a cliffhanger. she's dead. And then the next episode picks up with like a flashback of them kind of meeting up with each other as kids again.
And that's specifically the episode I think that is the Emmy episode. Like
is the Emmy episode. Yeah.
That's the one. Like, it's just so well done in how they tell the story of their entire lives in this one episode. And it's so cyclical. I can't speak that word right now. It's so cyclical in how they tell the story. It's the idea of like how Inside Llewyn Davis is a folk song, where it's just like the beginning is the end is the beginning is the end.
Right.
It has that structure. And I think it's just wonderfully handled in how they do that, because like if you didn't do it with the flashbacks, it would be fine. Like it would be, it totally would have worked. But like the do not go far from me part of that, where like you see why that is such an important phrase for them in the childhood of these two characters. It's just, it hits hard. It's so good.
Yeah. And it sets up, I mean, like that, the Vestiges kind of sets up this like really kind of cool extending the universe out in a really kind of exciting way, because
it's the Infinity Gauntlet.
The Infinity Gauntlet, right? That Grog's lineage has. I mean,
I mean, literally, they're getting.
Oh, they're getting
items.
the Infinity Stones. Yeah, to kind of take on the Chroma Conclave, because it's tough, because that first episode they kind of did a thing that is all like very referential to Dungeons and Dragons, which is the party got too strong, so I need to find a way as the DM to nerf the party. I'm just going to take out all of their achievements from the previous campaign, more or less, and kind of make them a little bit start over, but not quite, because they're still pretty strong. But all of their allies and approaches are going to be kind of wiped out. But, the Chroma Conclave, I think, the difficulty I had with that is like they certainly seemed evil and kind of menacing. But the kind of motivations that drove them, other than just being greedy dragons, was hard. But thankfully that, I can't remember the character's name, but the one that Matt Mercer played, the one that spits
Umbrasyl.
Acid. Umbrasyl, thank you. Like that one got a little bit more characterization than the rest. The other ones were just like, like I'm a big dragon and I like melt people. Like you should be really scared of me.
Well, that's
like, I mean, that's
think,
scary.
I think the story, at least for next season, if not season 4 as well, will be like the Chroma Conclave is a multiple season arc.
As they set it up, it definitely looks that way. But it's the Vestiges. Like what I'm getting at is like the dragons didn't really feel like they helped shape my understanding of Critical Role's like world that much. But like the Vestiges did in a really unique way, because then you kind of get a connection to these like higher level deities or entities that are kind of moving pieces around. And so, the chess piece that he ends up picking up, that one in particular, like having a really kind of unique thread with this like raven god, I guess is what I would call it. Probably it was like a really fun kind of storyline to kind of explore back and forth.
Yeah.
Yes. And that's so like badass, sounding.
It's so good.
The matron of ravens.
He's the crow.
He gets to be the crow. He can't die. He's more or less invincible, and he's really good at martial arts.
And he's supposed to guide people into death.
So, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That I thought was like the really fun Vestige kind of storyline. Grog's Vestige storyline was also there too. That came later in the season, obviously. I know we're still kind of talking about those first few episodes, but it was kind of fun too, because we watched episode 4 here, and we had just had like a dinner party, and my friend and my wife were kind of in the kitchen hanging out, and then his partner was sitting on the couch with me, and she was like, just put on something just so we can watch, because she doesn't really watch TV. And so I put that on.
Oh, I have to do this podcast.
I do this podcast. I need to watch this show, and I'm pretty behind. And so I put it on, and this was like a couple weeks ago or whatever. And she's like, oh, this looks like gargoyles. And I had never really. And so like, she's this like brilliant visual artist, but she's like, this really reminds me of gargoyles. And I can kind of see the influence of that style of animation. From that era.
And gargoyles is influenced by Batman the Animated Series. And so like, that lineage is like, of course.
Is there.
It's going to be there.
And so, but then she like just started taking it apart, and like he's hearing her see a random episode of the show was also kind of like fun, because she was just like obsessed with how good everyone's voice was.
Oh my god, yeah.
And I was like,
I mean, it's the fucking A squad. It's unbelievable how talented these people are.
This is the A squad. But it was cool to have her kind of watch it and like try to learn about it as we were watching it, and kind of her frame of reference was like this animated series that I know you and I both really loved, which was Gargoyles growing up. And it like made me kind of think about the series almost like in that way too, only because, you know, I almost wanted the kind of return to form of kind of like what you got with the first season a little more, which is like one character really gets center stage for the whole season. But that said, they have so much they have to cover, and they don't know how many seasons they're going to have, so they have to kind of do everything they can. It's a really difficult writing challenge they have,
and there would
be able to kind of pull this off.
There would be 3 or 4 seasons in this season alone of if you were to do that, because the stuff with Scanlan and Kaylee is its own huge arc.
Another plot line.
Grog's stuff with his uncle is a huge arc. Like, all these personal arcs are very important to the story. Yeah. But I don't think they could do it without juggling them this way, because this, like, hey, give me 20 seasons of this, I'm fine. But like, you also have another one coming, and likely a third one after that. So exactly. I would assume that they just don't have the time or energy to be able to do that much stretching out at that point. But and I think that's more of like my preference for like how I wanted to experience the story versus how they decided to tell it at the end of the day. And personally, it's not from the standpoint of somebody who has seen both, this is the right way to do it for this show. It would be great to have that, like, be able to sit with that stuff, but like I was just saying, it would feel too drawn out in this format, because when I can see that, especially when there's like stuff that when it's like dozens of episodes apart and you don't realize there's similar things happening. If that was translated into this kind of show, you'd be like, oh wait, why are Grog and Vax having like an almost identical moment? Because you're only dealing with, even though it could be like 2 seasons separate from each other, it's still only like 5-6 episodes apart. So like in the actual play, it would be, you know, like 40 episodes apart. And so it has that time to breathe, and you don't think of them as a similar thing. And so in this format, it works a little bit better to have those stories kind of compressed, and those mirrors can kind of play off of each other a little bit more, and you can lean into it, as opposed to being like, you know, they're just the same thing. I think like one thing that and maybe this is why I appreciate episode 7 so much, is just like, also, this kind of, I'm fully branded out right now. Oh yeah. Oh my God. Look at that. I have the Legend of Vox Machina shaker. And you and you got a Molly shirt. Your Molly, thank you. I was trying to remember his name. You know, I think why I liked episode 7 is it was the one that felt the most like a bottle episode too. Because you know, they're being really efficient, like we've already kind of noted, with like how they're trying to tell the story. The number of episodes they have. Like, number 7. I'm trying to, because it is so compressed. That's the one where number they kind of split the party, and they. Oh, that is the one where they. That's the one. The previous episode 6 is where they are fighting Umbrasyl. Yes, and it's actually the first Feywild episode, right? Yes. Yeah. Okay. Gotcha, and so Grog and Co are off doing their thing. Vex and Vax are doing their thing in the Fey realm. And so I liked it because it's the one that I just felt like it finally took a break. You know, from you got some opportunity for the characters to kind of rest and like breathe a little bit, and like also spend some more time with them in ways that weren't just about advancing a specific. Obviously, plot lines were advanced, but it didn't feel as overt as sometimes it can with some of the like action that's happening. But it pushed forward, or the exposition that's happening. What that episode did more so was it furthered character plot as opposed to story plot, which I think is, you know, it does as much as I'm a proponent of like the compressing everything together. I agree. You still need these episodes to allow characters to actually move forward a little bit in their own personal lives, because you otherwise have characters who are the same at the beginning and the end. And so and I honestly love episodes like that. And I think, like, you know, if this was a 20 episode
series, per season, then you'd see more of that, just because you have to, as a writer, I think, get a break from the main action as well. And that's kind of what those older cartoons from the 90s we just talked about, like either it's Batman or Gargoyles, there's a central plot line, but then a lot of the episodes are kind of self-contained. This one is just, the primary action is always driving forward every episode.
Yeah.
And so when you take a break from that and just let the characters kind of interact with one another in this kind of, wacky circumstances that they're in, like Grog lost his power and was turned into a frail man.
Looked like me.
Because he looked like me. And, then you have the other crew exploring the Fey realm, but not totally accomplishing a ton. It just kind of felt like a nice break.
Yeah.
At first anyway. Yeah. It just felt like a nice break. I guess.
Because that's where you get the, like, if you recall on the episode we did for last season, I was like, oh, it's interesting that they're putting like Vex and Percy like in bed together already, and like they're going to that a little bit quick, but now they're actually letting that get explored a little bit more, which is a very exciting thing, because it's also like with that, and then also the Keyleth and Vax stuff is getting a little bit more teased. They threw in Wilfredell to make her blush a little bit. Also, that's one of the things that there's a lot of changes with, which are changes for the better. There are some non-consensual kisses in the campaign that they are like, he's a go get 'em kind of guy, and so he's just kind of like that old kind of idea of like, get the girl and kiss her, just like I'm a man's man, so I kiss those ladies. But it's handled better in this show. It's more of a flirtation without pushing that boundary. Because that is something that I believe Marisha even had talked about before, which is like, is a little bit uncomfortable for Keyleth to like have those moments happen without her being a part of the decision. And so I didn't even know that, obviously, again, because of not having seen the campaign. You're always filling in these gaps of like weird things that happened to Keyleth or Marisha Ray from campaign 1, because if you remember too, she was my like favorite character from season 1. Keyleth I had no idea. Keyleth is the most powerful person in this group, and she just doesn't know it yet, basically. You saw that a lot in season 1, and in this season you see it even more, where she turns into like the firewalker. You see her starting to come into it, and you see her plane shift a little bit, and with the elemental aspect of that is such a like, it doesn't quite hit the same way as the first season, when she has that like let the scream out moment, and she kind of just like hits everybody with that magical light, but it hits in an equally effective way, which is like last season it was like, oh holy shit, and now it's like, oh fuck yeah, you're starting to get it, like you're starting to understand a little bit more, and they do a really good job with tying in why characters start to understand their power like that. And like go to Grog specifically, where it's like, this is another big deal moment when he knows his power comes from his friends. Like that is a huge moment in the campaign. And then it follows through with the Vox Machina fuck shit up, which, again, 1 for 1, you have to keep that line in. But I think they do a really good job of making sure that these characters are earning their moments. And Keyleth specifically, as we were talking about, like having her come back and be able to be with her people and be with her father for that moment, to actually go through and to feel her mother, who was lost for a very long time, and you already know what happened to her, but to have that moment where she feels that closeness to family, to allow her to reach that status is like such a tremendous translation of how they did it on the show. I think it's handled really nicely. And there's also like, I don't have confirmation on this, but there is a shot where she's like in the elemental form, like it's down low. So she looks like crazy huge. And it looks like a shot from Watchmen when Dr. Manhattan is like huge in Vietnam and he's vaporizing people. It looked a lot like that, which was just a cool reference if it is. And if not, just a cool coincidence. But yeah.
I mean, again, she continues to be a really kind of fun character to follow in this series as well, and kind of see her kind of grow more. We also, because of the nature, I think of, you know, this was an inside joke to a degree in the first season where like Ashley Johnson was like away during campaign 1, as she often is. Like, I think I even tuned into like a recent episode on Thursday night, and like she was in like the small cam again.
Well, she had COVID for this one.
Oh, she did?
Yeah.
Okay. I didn't know the why. I didn't know the why. I just kind of saw it and I was like, I wonder if she's like filming a TV show again.
With Vox Machina and the beginning of...
Was she on Blind Spot at that point?
Yes.
Is that what it was?
Yeah. Okay. And they'll make those jokes about it. Like they'll say it like Caleb in character would be like, oh, it is there's blind spot or whatever. It's like they would do that all the time. This was just circumstances of like living in now, but
yes, but like it was it was cool to kind of see a little bit more Pike in this campaign taking on a more active role and interacting with the characters, because even in the first season, as like kind of a nod to Ashley Johnson not being there, you know, she wasn't necessarily, there was a couple episodes I remember in the first season where she like was just talking, she was kind of like astral projecting herself or something.
That was like I think the first episode or two. Yeah.
And so I liked getting to see her interact with the characters more and have her kind of grow closer to like the different people in the party. You always get the sense that she's tight with Grog, but seeing her interact with Scanlan,
see the exploration of why she's close with Grog. And that she doesn't even know fully why she's close with Grog. He's just been around and was like a friend to her great. So I don't know how many greats grandfather, Henry Winkler. Just it's these like the singular character stories are always like really good. Like Keyleth is really good. But I've always appreciated a little bit more the coupling sort of storylines, because it allows them to explore a little bit. And that includes the twins, even though that their lineage is tied to their story with one another. Like it's not the same as like Scanlan and Pike, or like Keyleth and Vax, or Vax rather. There's the joke.
Right.
But yeah, it's always interesting to me when two characters have their moments. Like Scanlan and Grog having like little romps and misadventures is some of my favorite stuff from the first campaign. The outhouse scene is changed for this. It's still in there, but it's not an outhouse scene anymore. It's just Grog pretending to take a shit at the edge of a cliff to talk to Craven Edge. But like,
no, I remember that.
It's those things. Like I think I told you last year, like you're gonna have to watch like an animatic somebody drew of it, because it's unbelievably funny. And I'll make sure I link you to that after we finish up, because it is absolutely hilarious. But it's those kinds of moments where it's just like they endear these characters to you, whether it's like a silly moment like that, or a moment where Vax is, pleading for his sister's life and is willing to give up his own to save her. It's these kinds of moments that like, those are the ones that carry so much weight. Like obviously the single character stuff does carry weight, but like, it's just the way they play off one another to get to that resolution for me that like always hits so much harder for some reason. And I'm really, and part of it might be because when certain characters are on their own, they will make a dumber decision. And it's like, it'll be a funny thing that happens, but it's like, oh no, you fucked up. There is a Keyleth moment that I will not say specifically what happens, but the goldfish moment is something that I guarantee will happen on this show. It is.
So I shouldn't Google that if I want to be surprised.
It is very funny, but it's like, oh man, that was a bad decision. But yeah, it's stuff like that where I'm like, if she just waited a second for somebody else to talk to her, they could have had a very good moment of figuring out like how to do this situation better. And maybe it wouldn't have been as funny, but like it would have. Yeah. It would have maybe had like a more proper story resolution. And so it's finding these balances of things that I think is interesting on this show too, because they don't leave anything lingering despite the fact that it's so compact compared to the campaign. But they do change enough that it's like, it's fresh and there are moments where like I'm surprised, and not like, nothing specifically comes to mind right now as I try to explain this, but like, you know, there's small changes and big changes. I already said like how many episodes that they had to like change the timeline on to like make the show work. But then there's the small stuff that's just like in that final fight with Umbrasyl. When they try to trap him, when Vax and Scanlan go inside of him,
yes,
via the butt.
Via the butt.
That's not how they got in there in the campaign.
Oh, it isn't.
Like, it's so.
I just figured with
so
like
funny
Sam Riegel being who he is,
exactly.
I'm like, of course he would do this.
It works so well for this show, and I think it's technically the better thing. But something they lose out of that is in the campaign they dimension door in. But Scanlan is the one that's doing Dimension Door, and he can't Dimension Door with somebody bigger than him. So they have to shrink Vax down to be Scanlan sized, and then they Dimension Door inside. So there's these funny things that are lost, but it's not for the worse. Like I think that this worked out.
I just felt it was like the typical kind of irreverent nature of the show.
Tonally
that
on the nose for Critical Role to have that moment happen the way it did, that it's like I didn't even second guess it when it happened. I thought about it afterwards and I was like, wait, that's different. But like as it was happening, I was just like, yeah, that's Critical Role. Yeah, that's exactly what happens.
As a person that you know campaign 1 more than me, I just don't know it at all compared to campaign 2, especially.
Honestly, I do know campaign 2 better than campaign 1. You do know it better,
okay?
Yeah,
but you know a lot of it more than me in certain moments. Right. I think you resonate with you differently. So I feel like if you like. Speaking from like the other kind of culture part of it, right? Of like Dungeons and Dragons culture, like if you're into playing D&D, watching D&D, just even agnostic of Critical Role itself, I feel like you would really dig this show. It like really delivers a lot of D&D-ness. Well, through the show.
Yeah, it's that, but it's also, I think it's just a really well-made, adult-oriented animated show. That like, Young Justice isn't necessarily adult oriented. It's kind of for a wider audience than that. But
Invincible certainly is.
Invincible is, and Prime is going nuts with like how good their animation stuff is between those two shows. And then they just announced a deal with Scott Snyder, who is a comic writer who did like the New 52 run on Batman that is like the Court of Owls and all that stuff. He has a book called Witches on Image Comics with Jock.
Oh, I've heard of that. I think I've read the first issue of it too.
Yeah, it's super really good. It's creepy and like Jock does the art, so it's like unbelievable. But like they just announced that they're going to do an animated show with them.
Ooh,
and it's like, yeah, sweet, dude. Okay. Now you're getting like horror. You have your superhero, your fantasy, you got your horror stuff going on.
I feel like since we oftentimes will talk about, stuff that's on Amazon Prime, I end up telling you why I think that they're still kind of killing it out of a lot of the streaming services.
It's kind of like, I feel like it's Amazon, so it's very weird to say this, but it's like it's weirdly underrated in the streaming services for some reason.
Yeah.
And I think it's all just a matter of like, because people are only thinking about the live action stuff, which is like, it's hit or miss, but like most of it's fine. I mean, but like the animation is just like,
I've enjoyed
phenomenal.
The Amazon animation stuff on Amazon has been phenomenal, but like Amazon, I've talked a lot to you about The Expanse being kind of phenomenal, especially when Amazon picked it up. And even watching
The Boys and stuff is
The Boys is phenomenal,
which I didn't watch because it started like when I was dealing with. Well, it started like when I was dealing with my family health stuff, and I was like, I need hope.
I don't know.
I need hopeful really good things.
The Boys,
no cynical shit.
Yeah.
And so it's just like at this point, I just haven't gotten around to it now that I'm like out of that. But yeah, it's
their airport novel adaptations like the Jack Ryan and the Reacher, like those have been solid. Yeah. And my wife and I are also just finished The Peripheral recently, which
just
was
picked up for season 2.
Got picked up for another. Got picked up for season 2. That was great. So I don't know. I think like you add in like additional kind of adult animated series like Invincible, like Soon to Be the Witches, and of course Legend of Vox Machina, and you just have like, oh, this is a really solid offering,
well-rounded
content.
Yeah.
It covers kind of a lot of kind of critical bases of like entertainment, and what it offers people, genre or otherwise. And so I think I'm glad that have they announced us another season of this? I'm guessing they're going to do another season of Vox Machina.
Season 3 of this was announced last year.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
at New York Comic Con, they announced season 3 for this before they even had the release date officially announced for this season. So
yeah. I mean, they do the classic kind of like bad guy looking out over a field of eggs, being like, the Chroma Conclave is going to take over the world kind of thing. Yeah. And you're kind of like, okay, so they clearly have more conflict to go, obviously, with this group of dragons.
There's a whole other huge story arc after this one too.
Mm-hmm.
There's what I will just say is the Whispered One, which was teased.
Cool names again. Yeah, Matron of Ravens, the Chroma Conclave.
That is actually a character that you will know from other things. That it's Vecna. But yeah, it's that is its own like harrowing shit. That is that's where like that's the end game, like Avengers Endgame storyline for Vox Machina, and it's gonna be crazy when it gets there. But like, I would say that would probably be like if they finish Chroma Conclave next season, which I feel like they could do.
Seems like they will.
Yeah, but I still feel like they could do 2 more seasons on it, because like you do a season per dragon basically and work it out that way. Because you have this whole setup with an alliance with one of them at the end of this season. And so going forward, there's going to be some interesting stuff coming up, especially with like, we haven't really got that much with Ridley, which is she's the character that is like with Umbrasyl, who is like, if Percy is like essentially the creator of firearms in this world, she is the other one also creating them, like at least in the campaign. I don't know how they're going to handle it here, but like there is a lot to explore there, to explore with the alliance of Vox Machina with one of the dragons. There is a lot of stuff to certain character fates that will happen, and new characters that will come in that are new party members even. So
that's exciting.
Yeah, and it's like there's just some cool stuff to happen, that like there's a lot to explore within this storyline before you even get to the Vecna storyline, which is like the Vecna storyline is still like there in campaign 3. Like it's pretty wild that like, because that is Laudna is or at least was sort of enraptured with the presence of the one who killed her and that was a worshiper of the Whispered One. So that there's so much like lore that they can use in this world at this point that it's like they could spread the rest of campaign 1 over 4 or 5 more seasons.
Wow.
I do think that they will compress the rest of the Chroma Conclave stuff to next season. I think it may be a little too much to stretch over 2 seasons, but they could. Like, logistically, they could do a dragon per season kind of thing.
And with streaming and everything, and it seems to be like, I think this is a whole other topic, but just the idea of like shows seemingly getting canceled after a few seasons to make sure that they don't have to like pay out
or one,
residuals.
One residuals like being the thing that's getting shows canceled is
insane,
fucking dumbest shit in the world.
Yeah.
Pay the people making the shows that get people to pay for your shit. God damn it.
Agreed. So like, do you think a show like this will fall under the same kind of issue?
I don't think so, because this show started with the Kickstarter.
Yeah, that's true. So what's interesting then is just kind of like, how many, because also I can't recall very many Prime shows with like a super long lifetime, like streaming services in general with these kind of flagship programs. Like there's very few that have made it beyond season 3 or 4, right? Like
at least in the modern era, I think that's right. But like you look back at like the early days of like Netflix with Orange is the New Black. I think that was like, wasn't that like 5 or 6?
That was 4 or 5 seasons. Stranger Things is pretty high up there now too.
Well, that's a weird one too, though, because that's been like they just did
that's a worldwide hit too.
But they also just did 4, and it's been like it might as well have been like 12 years.
Yeah, but like I'm trying to think of it in terms of with all of these new streaming services, who has made it really far, and Prime still doesn't necessarily have, at least to my memory, like a super long running streaming series yet. It has all of these
the Man
kind of
in the
seeds,
High
right?
Castle, I think, was also like I think they have a couple of the average length of like a 4 season, which is not like,
because I forgot the Man in the High Castle was Prime.
Yeah, I think it was their first one, but like it's that kind of stuff where it's just like, I think we need to reconsider what the runtime of a series is, because obviously with network shows, we were getting like, whether it was the original Ninja Turtles cartoon or The Office,
22 episodes of 20 some minutes, right?
And for like 10 seasons. Like Friends was like 12 seasons. Like that is the norm for TV in its prime.
Right.
No pun intended. But like it's with streaming services, I think you have the ability to say like, oh, we don't have to worry about the advertisers. So we're just going to tell our story. And unfortunately, the corporation that allows people to tell their stories will be like, no more. But like, they're not tied to we have to keep this going because it's bringing us money. So it's like, there's a positive and a negative side of the same thing.
And that's kind of what I'm getting at, I guess, is, when I always think of, I haven't listened to it in a while, but one of the creators of the Expanse book series, and then became like one of the creators of the show.
Corey?
Ty Abrams.
Why am I thinking?
No, is that his name? Ty Frank? Is it Ty Frank? It might be Ty Frank. Ty Frank and Wes Chatham.
I think there's another sci-fi book series I'm thinking of.
Maybe. But in any case, he really kind of steadfastly notes, like, we could have told, there's more books in the series than when we decided to end it. But I knew that I wanted to end it after 6 seasons. We didn't write it past 6 seasons. We wanted it to end at that point.
They also had the unfortunate circumstances of, like, they were on
Sci-Fi and moved to Prime
cable TV, and like it's a weird circumstance with that one too, just because it's like
Even then though they knew that they wanted it to be 6 seasons, is what I'm saying. So like, does Vox Machina know
the problem
what its life cycle is?
The problem is,
that's what
if sci-fi held on to it, they could have said, you know what, we don't need you. We don't need you around anymore. We own the show version of it. We can get a different showrunner, and we'll just continue it. And that's the weird thing about TV on network and cable too, is that it's just like, if they want to pinch those pennies or grab at those pennies and keep something going, even though it's not good for the story, they will. But they moved to Prime though, and then they knew they wanted to end it after season 6.
Which is what I'm saying is, does like Vox Machina know what its life cycle is? Is it gonna like does it have the next couple seasons planned out in what way? Or does it want to try to run interminably, which I kind of hope it doesn't, you know?
I don't have that. Well, it's not going to run forever, just because like they have a finite ending to the campaign that I'm sure that they want to say like, this is the end eventually. Of the story. Yeah.
Yeah.
But like, I don't think that they will draw things out and add like so much new stuff. Like they'll do what they're doing with compressing stories that like were at different parts. But I don't think they'll just add whole cloth new stories into it. So I think that we're in a safe spot with this show with not having to worry about that. But I can't say for sure if they have like, we have 4 seasons that we're doing the rest of this in. That like, I think it's a little bit of a Lost situation right now where no. I'm not saying like in terms of like, it's aimless or anything. I'm just, I think that
that's where my brain went.
I think that they're just in the situation where like, they know what the ending is. They currently maybe don't know the exact number of seasons they're supposed to have
to get to that.
Like it's not ordered yet, but they probably have a plan of how many seasons they want to do that.
Yeah.
So I think it's a little bit of column A, a little column B, where it's like, it's not fully up to them. So they're probably setting up a pretty good guideline and then working out a plan B in case something happens. But I don't think they have to worry about it, because if they're ordering the Mighty Nine show and they set up an overall deal with the company anyway, like, I think that they are set to basically go however they want to do it. They just need the official like go ahead on stuff.
Yeah. And honestly, like, I just never want to see something overstay its welcome to kind of also, you know, reference Lost again. Yes. But I think given how much control it seems like creators have in streaming, like I was talking about with Ty Frank, like saying we're going to end it after season 6, regardless of how much story there is that could be told in this universe. I do hope that they figure out a way to wrap it up in a way that, you know, allows us to like remember the characters really well and not necessarily kind of, I don't know. I never like shows that just run forever, I guess.
I would put my money on them not fading by having to do that. Like I was saying, with the fact that like we already know they ordered the other one and they set up an overall deal to do like more stuff. I would put like my life savings, which is very small, on the fact that they are probably going to just like, they're probably on a presentation by presentation basis of like, okay, we have this one planned out. Okay, do that season. And that's, I feel like that's just how streaming works now, which is not great to like have to sit on that like teetering fence that way. But I think that they pretty much have the faith from Prime to basically be like, hey, here's our story. And then they just need to like wait for somebody high up at Amazon to go like, oh no, yeah, that's fine, go ahead. And they just have to do that on a yearly basis, because that's the unfortunate machine that we deal with now. But I wouldn't presume that it would not fade into irrelevance in the way that a lot of shows can. Just because it is like, it's them top to bottom creating it. So I would at least assume that they have a plan B for finishing up a story, at least, and making it like we can work out an ending, even if it's not the ending of the campaign that was brought into the show. So like,
Right.
if it happens that like the end of the Chroma Conclave, they have to call it a day on this series because Amazon wants them to focus on Mighty Nine at that point, then I'm sure that they can work out a satisfying ending for it that way too. So it's not too short and not overstaying its welcome.
Yeah. But it's another great animated series from these guys. And, I feel like anybody who likes Dungeons and Dragons or genre television, adult animated series, or, the chocolate and peanut butter combination of all of these things, like this is a really great show to check out if somehow people like all those things and haven't seen this yet.
Yeah. If that Venn diagram has not like crossed over on you yet for some reason.
Surprisingly.
Well, I think we tangented on about streaming services for long enough that I think we can call it an episode at this point.
Sounds good.
Thanks for coming back on the show. Of
course.
Obviously, I'll have you back on for season 3.
Yeah.
And then, of course, once Mighty Nine starts, and you can get it right up in your Duffy about it.
I can't wait.
I will happily bring you on for that too.
Great.
So thanks again, and until next time, bye.